Welcome. Today we're very privileged to have as our guest Avi Goldwasser, who is the co-founder of the David Project, an organization dedicated to supporting Jewish students on campus, a former member of the board of directors of the American Jewish Committee in Boston, the Boston Jewish Community Relations Council, and the Boston Bureau of Jewish Education. He's produced several films, including the award-winning documentary The Forgotten Refugees, Columbia Unbecoming, which was about a crisis at Columbia, and Hate Spaces, The Politics of Intolerance on Campus, which seems particularly relevant at this moment. Avi is a former financial executive in high tech and has a BS in engineering from CCNY. And an MBA from New York University. And if we have a little time at the end, I just personally would like to ask somebody with a high-tech background how this disaster could have happened with the border fence in Israel, but that's a separate topic. All right, so welcome. Thank you for being with us. First of all, I want to hold up the main reason I have you here is because I read this book, which I thought was fantastic, Betrayal. It's actually an edited book with essays by Charles Jacobs, Avi Goldwasser, but many others, including Alan Dershowitz, and deals with the failure of American Jewish leadership prior to this war. But I think there are lessons that are relevant for what's going on right now in terms of how the American Jewish leadership is responding to the current war in Gaza against Hamas. And I wanted to ask Avi, how do you think the American Jewish leadership is responding?
Well, we've been critical of the American Jewish leadership for a long time. I think that given the situation in Israel, they're responding well. I have no complaints. I think they're very much focused on supporting Israel, on raising money, and I think they're trying to do the right thing. That's not an issue right now.
Okay.
Israel. I'm talking about the established Jewish leadership, of whom we've been very critical in the book. I think what they're doing right now is the right thing. I have no criticism of their
Would this include groups like ADL?
Yeah, it includes, when we criticize Jewish leadership, we're talking about the main organizations, which typically include ADL, AJC, the federations. The exception to those organizations has always been ZOA and some of the other organizations, but I think in this current situation, I think they're doing the right thing.
And do you think ADL has come out strong enough condemning Black Lives Matter for its support of Hamas?
I think it's a good point. I think the one thing where Jewish organization falls short is criticizing organizations who they supported in the past and who have not reciprocated by supporting the Jewish organizations. I think ADL primarily has been betrayed by organizations and communities that they supported, they reached out to, and they have not reciprocated. And they have yet to come to terms with that betrayal. So yeah, they have not done enough. That's one criticism I do have in putting pressure on universities, specifically, where Jewish students are intimidated, harassed, because of the current situation in the Middle East. And to some extent, the universities are getting a bit of a free pass. And I would like to see the major Jewish organizations be much more aggressive in holding university presidents accountable for the safety and comfort of Jewish students. I also would like to see the US government, which has a lot of influence in universities, to have the same standards when it comes to how Jews are treated on campus. Should be the same as the way any of the protected minorities, the blacks, the gays, and so forth. And that hasn't happened yet. There is a double standard, primarily because Jews are considered white people and not a protected minority. So that's one area that I like to see Jewish organizations do more to put pressure on universities to protect the rights of Jewish students on campus.
Well, I think that's an interesting position because I would like to see Jews treated equally as American citizens and not to have any protected minorities on campus. I
Well,
think
as
we
long
have
as,
to go back to equal rights under
yeah, yeah,
law for
look,
everybody because there's going to be a never-ending conflict in that way. But that's a separate issue.
yeah, it's a separate issue. Right now, the point is there are protected minorities for whatever reason, and Jews are excluded, and that's not fair.
But the point is, a white Christian can also be attacked on campus and is not
I'm
protected.
fighting a simple battle.
Yeah, but the point is, let's just protect people, whoever they. I mean, that's my view. But in any case, you're entitled to your view. The second thing is, though, ADL, you're saying has been betrayed by its allies. But my understanding is ADL gets a tremendous amount of money from Soros Foundation or affiliated groups, and is maybe the major funder of ADL right now. And in addition, they also fund groups like Black Lives Matter, let's say. And is it really just, they don't know what's going on, or are certain groups off limits because of institutional ties?
Well, I can only judge ADL by their actions. I don't know what their motives are, but clearly their actions have been to support a progressive political agenda, sometimes at the expense of protecting the Jewish community. And it may be misguided, but a lot of their funding comes from non-Jewish sources in Silicon Valley. I don't know how much Soros funds them. They raise $100 million a year. It's a huge budget. And I don't think enough of it is being spent to protect the Jewish community. A lot of it is being spent to promote a political agenda.
Well,
And
let's talk about the Jewish community, because right now, on all the campuses, you have these demonstrations all over the country. You have these most presidents refusing to condemn what looks to me like outright anti-Semitism and certainly hatred of Israel. And yet, as far as I know, and you might be more up to date than I am, we haven't really seen ADL weigh in heavily on this issue. I mean, do you know what they're doing on this?
I don't know, but you're right. I've not seen them be visibly involved in what's going on the campus.
And yet their raison d'etre was to fight defamation of the Jewish people.
That was the original goal. They've deviated from that for the last couple of decades because they felt that politically they wanted to align themselves with progressive politics, and that's what they've done. So
and what if progressive politics are now allied de facto with Hamas?
Well, that's the dilemma they face, and I think they are. I believe that they're rethinking their position. But for a while, they wanted to be aligned with what they would consider the right side of history or whatever, and that certainly has backfired on them. That support for Black Lives Matter and other progressive cause has not worked out the way they expected. So they're smart people. It's a question of how quickly they'll pivot. It's happening.
So you actually expect ADL to disavow Black Lives Matter and Hamas?
No, I don't expect, I don't know what to expect. I'm just saying that I don't think they're stupid. I think the events in recent weeks are a bit of a wake-up call for those who had some utopian fantasies. I think those will fade. And I think they're under pressure to do something and something different. But eventually, everybody has to sort of comply with reality. It takes a traumatic event for people to change, and we're going through traumatic events. So I'm somewhat optimistic that they will slowly turn, try to balance everything. We'll see what happens. I don't predict the future, but I'm encouraged by the small changes that are taking place.
Okay, so I have to say I'm surprised by that, but on the other hand, any optimism at this time we can be grateful for. Could you talk a little bit? You were very involved in Boston Jewish politics, and there's articles in here. I don't know if it's by Charles Jacobs or someone about big controversies in Boston about Islamic centers and mosques and working with the Islamic community. And could you explain a little bit what that's about? And of course, it relates to Hamas because Hamas was founded by the Muslim Brotherhood. It is essentially an Islamic organization.
Yes, so actually we were quite heavily involved with that. I was subpoenaed, we were sued, countersued. It had to do with the fact the city of Boston gave land to the Muslim Brotherhood to build a mosque in Boston, as if Saudi sponsored mosque, as if Saudi doesn't have enough money. The city had to subsidize the land. And when we found out who the board of trustees of that mosque were going to be, we called a meeting of Jewish leaders and said, hey, look what's going on here. This is the Muslim Brotherhood. These are anti-Semites. One of the members of the board was Karadawi, who has made several speeches against Jews and gays. And yet the city of Boston is subsidizing the land to build a mosque. So that started a whole chain of events. As I said, we were sued, countersued, and so forth. And we were disappointed by the Jewish leadership response. Fundamentally, Jewish leaders want to make nice, play nice, and they thought they could just reach out to the Muslim community, do interfaith dialogue, and they'll take care of it. Well, as things turns out, the Islamic Center of Boston was built, and naturally we found the curriculum, and it preaches anti-American, anti-Jewish matters. So we were concerned that there'd be the radicalization of the once moderate Muslim Boston community. And to some extent, we've seen that happen. The famous marathon bomber attended one of those mosques, and we had a rabbi who was stabbed in Boston as well. And I think there's a lack of awareness of the radicalization of Muslims in America, mostly through mosques and radical imams. So we try to warn the Jewish community, but I think they found it difficult to oppose the mosque. I think they found it difficult to do things outside the sort of progressive comfort zone of supporting immigrants, supporting the other, and assuming that everybody's the same, everybody means well.
At this rate, it looks like you might have more luck getting the Saudis to crack down on the mosque than the Americans or the American Jews. Let me ask you, in Boston, would you say the majority of American Jews are progressive?
For sure, for sure. Certainly, majority of my neighbors and friends are.
And what would their view be of, for example, the current conflict over Gaza?
Well, the people I speak to are shocked, dismayed, and concerned. Look, these are wonderful, decent people. They may be what I consider a little bit delusional, a little bit naive. Life has been good in America. So they may not fully appreciate how exceptional America is, and that things can change, no matter how good they may appear.
So you actually credit this all just to naivete more than actually any
Not
sort of
all.
malicious
Not all.
intent.
No, there's no malicious intent. I think it's a combination of sort of progressive utopian ideology and naivete. It's very easy to be naive if you grow up in America.
Okay, so you're more moderate even than I am. Why don't you talk a little bit about your films now? Well, let's start with Columbia Unbecoming, because that was a big film about what was going on with Jews at Columbia. Why don't you talk a little bit? What was that about, and what was your role? Why did you make it, and what was the result of making it?
Right. So Charles Jefferson and I started the David Project in 2002 because of what we were seeing happening on campus. My daughter was in college, my future son-in-law, and I noticed that no one is helping the students. They were abandoned. That's the only way I can describe it. They were abandoned. There was only Hillel on campus, and quite frankly, Hillel wasn't equipped to handle conflict. Hillel was designed to enable Jewish boy to meet Jewish girl. And therefore, when there's a conflict, they didn't know how to deal with it. They avoided it. They pretended there is no problem. So we got involved on campuses in Boston, MIT, Harvard, and so forth. And one day we got a call from New York, from Columbia students, who said they have a problem and they can't get anybody in New York City to help them. This is astounding. The biggest Jewish city in the world, and the students could not find anybody to help them. So we had two Jews from Boston, Charles Jacobs and I, come to New York City to meet with students in Columbia because they couldn't find anybody in New York City. And when we met with them, it was really sad to listen to their stories, how they were being mistreated by professors in Columbia University. The administration wouldn't do anything, Hillel wouldn't do anything, and the Jewish leaders in New York wouldn't do anything. And they were very frustrated. The result was that we made a film called Columbia Unbecoming, documenting what was going on there. And we presented the film to the Columbia trustees, some of them, Columbia administration, president, the provost, hoping that they would deal with it because they've been ignoring the problem when the students complain. For 6 months, we tried to work within the university system. Nothing happened. At that point, the students agreed to have a news conference. And we had a news conference, and we got results. There were articles written in the major New York newspapers. And in fact, we were on Fox News, CNN, ABC, PBS. It got a lot of attention because people couldn't believe that in the biggest Jewish city, you had our professors intimidating Jewish students in class. And so anyway, that was one of the first documentation of the hostility to Jewish students on campus. But as always, these things, the university can outlast us. So they made some indication of investigating, doing various things, but fundamentally nothing changed in Columbia. The Jewish community refused to really get involved and put pressure. And the thing died after a while. Students graduate, the professors stay on. But yeah, it was disappointment because we raised the alarm and things have gotten so much worse in the last 20 years because the Jewish leadership failed to act when the problem was small and containable. And now we have what we have.
All right, let me go on to your other film, Hate Spaces, The Politics of Intolerance on Campus.
Yeah, so Columbia Unbecoming was obviously about one campus, Columbia. Hate Spaces, which was done in 2016, 2017, a dozen years later, really try to look at multiple campuses and what's going on. And like any cancer, it metastasized from Columbia to many other schools. And you know what's going on today. So Hate Spaces really tries to show what's going on campuses around the country. It's especially bad in California, as you can imagine. And again, it's a failure of Jewish leadership. I can tell you, we met with Jewish leaders and asked them to support students on campus. And they said, well, that's not our job. It's Hillel, we do something else. And they neglected it. It was only last year that ADL finally got involved on campus. It's only last year or so that AJC got involved on campus. So 20 years or so after Columbia Unbecoming, they ignored the campus until recently. They're always about 2 decades behind. And that's a failure of leadership.
Why do you think they ignored it? What was their motivation?
Okay, leadership is about anticipating and acting, not reacting after things happen. That's not leadership. And Jewish leadership has always failed to understand the threat. Even now, they don't get the threat. They just react and operate in some old paradigm. Why? I can't tell you why.
Now tell me what the old paradigm is and what your new paradigm is that would address the threat.
The old paradigm in the Jewish community, ADL, is that they're looking for Nazis under the bed. It's always some right-wing nuts. So they've ignored the threat that comes from progressives, from the African-American community, and the recent Muslim immigrants. They don't want to deal with that. They look for Nazis. If you look at ADL's website for the last 10 years, that's what they talk about, right-wing extremists. All right? And that's not leadership. Leadership is the most important thing for any group. No group is successful without good leaders. No army wins without good generals. And we have weak leaders, and therefore the community will suffer, and we've suffered.
Let me ask you a question about that. You say that they all want to look for Nazis under the bed. But we've seen, even recently, Hamas supporters, and indeed in Gaza, Hamas operatives and supporters holding Nazi emblems and waving Nazi flags and so forth. Why is there such a distinction in the minds of the Jewish establishment between Hamas and progressive and right-wing Nazis?
Well, you have to ask them. I don't know what's in their mind. I think that it's not uncommon to fight the last war. I think Abe Foxman went through a horrific experience in World War II. He's traumatized by the Nazi experience. And it's something that you can get consensus from multiple political sources. If you wanted to talk about African-American anti-Semitism or leftist anti-Semitism, well, that's a bit more controversial. It's safer to talk about right-wing anti-Semitism.
Let me ask you a question on that. I have a friend who's a donor to many Jewish causes. He says it's not the staffs of these organizations that's the problem. It's that the Jewish establishment are left-wing in America. They support the left. And just like you had the Hitler-Stalin pact, and you had people who were pacifists, or people who said nothing about Stalin's persecution of Jews and supported the Soviet Union, as long as it's left-wing persecution, they'll remain silent. How do you react to that?
Excuse me. Look, it's hard to tell what the true motives are. So I can't tell you what people think that what they do. I think based on their behavior, I can only conclude that they are very much sensitive to not criticizing certain groups. And as long as they get away with it, as they have, they'll ignore it. We've had discussions with them. They rather not talk about Muslim anti-Semitism because they don't want to be accused of Islamophobia. They're not going to talk about African-American Jew hatred, so they don't want to be accused of racism. People avoid pain. But that's not what leadership is about. Leadership is about protecting your community. And it's not about them feeling good about themselves. There's a kind of what I call misunderstanding what leadership is about. So I can't explain why they did it. That's what they're doing, and they're failing. And there are consequences to the Jewish community. And that's why we started the Jewish Leadership Project. It all has to do with how you define leadership.
All right, let's talk about the Jewish Leadership Project and also about your book, Betrayal. Why did you publish this book, and what did you hope it would achieve?
Well, we concluded after 20 years of working on campus, supporting students, that we cannot win the battle. That unless the Jewish community, with its resources, is involved in fighting back against the hostilities on campus, we will lose. All the small organizations such as Stand With Us, Camera, ZOA, we're not going to win the battle. We're overwhelmed, outnumbered. And when the major Jewish organizations are not involved, we're going to lose. So we felt unless we can get the Jewish leadership involved in protecting Jews in America, we will lose. The well-intentioned small organizations do not have the resources. ADL is $100 million. The budgets of all the small ones don't come close. So we felt we had to expose their failure, the establishment failure, if there's going to be any hope of turning around. Now, we also realized that all we're trying to do is accelerate the learning curve, because when bad things happen, they will adjust for sure. But it's going to be late and it's going to be more expensive. What we're seeing right now is a moment of clarity in terms of who our real friends are, okay, and what the situation is that cannot be no longer ignored. And I'm confident that Jewish leadership will in fact adjust. They're slow, they're late, but they will adjust, and we're trying to accelerate the process. The purpose of the book is to educate the Jewish community about the failure of Jewish leadership. The essays are documentation of failures, why they fail, with the hope that this will influence Jewish leaders to adjust There are policies and strategies in order to be effective. They've been ineffective. And all they've done is double down on the same failed strategies, assuming that by doubling the effort, they'll get a different results, which is the definition of insanity. It's a failed strategy. Try something different. And it's hard.
Okay. Specifically, though, your book came out, and what has the response been? How have Jewish leaders reacted to it?
Well, I don't know how Jewish leaders reacted. I haven't seen them break directly. The people, the public, we've gotten some very good feedback. I think people feel it's about time that there's a discussion of the failed leadership in the community. It's not a pleasant subject. Nobody likes to see Jews attack other Jews. We've been criticized for being critical of Jewish leadership, which is a bit amazing because the same Jews are critical of Israeli leadership, but we can't criticize American leadership. But I think it's an important book, and we continue to promote it, and I think people read it, have a better understanding how their leaders have failed them. And with failed leaders, we cannot succeed.
What would you say the three biggest takeaways from your book are?
Well, I think the first takeaway is that you cannot succeed without good leaders, which is, if you think about it, it's obvious. The second thing is we had leaders who failed to anticipate emerging threats. I don't make any analogies to what happened in Gaza, but that's a massive failure. And it was obvious. It's not like Gaza. This was obvious. You could see things happen on campus. You could see what's happening in Democratic Party leadership. And what are you waiting for? They didn't act. And leadership is about anticipation. They're not leaders. What we have, if you look at the leaders, our leaders, Jewish leaders, are not elected. They're anointed by donors. Right? That's what they're. And many of them are academics, social workers. They're not fighters. They're politicians. We need warriors to defend a community under assault. We don't need diplomats. Okay? We need warriors who are willing to fight. And I think the lesson of the book, the message of the book is that you have to be willing to fight, which means, you can't make an omelet without breaking the eggs. You have to make choices. Some will require a trade-off. All right? We can't give people a free pass anymore, whether it's the media, the university, or radical African Americans. And they've been in the forefront of the assault on the Jewish community.
Okay, thank you for that. You mentioned donors. Have any big Jewish donors that you know of read your book, responded, gotten in touch with you, and what have they said?
Well, some have. We have our donors. I think they appreciate the book. I think they want us to be more aggressive in educating donors. And I think that the donors control the leaders. We want to influence the donors. The donors are usually well-intentioned, but they let's put it this way: they're very comfortable and they're very sort of cautious in terms of what they do, because they have a public persona reputation. So they only operate within a certain comfort zone. But they're critical. And by the way, this current crisis, you've had donors come out to cut funding for universities. That's the first step for donors to get involved, because they have the power.
Well, let me just ask about that. I know Wexner pulled out some money, I think, from Penn, and an Israeli board member pulled out some money from Harvard. Have any of those people come to you and said, I'm going to take that money and put it in your project?
No. We will try to reach out to them. It's all about relationships. But the important thing is that this crisis increases their self-awareness. Okay? That the problem is reached. The problem has always been there for the last 20 years. Okay? They either ignored it, didn't know about it, and now they have the proof point that the administration of many universities are cowards. We should have told them that, and are not sensitive to Jewish concern.
What about just general media response to this book? Were you reviewed in any mainstream publications that donors might read, like the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal?
No. Very hard. No, we haven't. Again, the book came out about 5 months ago. I think that it's a process. We have to raise money to promote it.
What about Jewish publications? Have Jewish publications reviewed your book?
Yeah, we've had several reviews. Um, yeah, but again, nothing happens instantly. It takes money, but we're comfortable with the progress we're making. I think people who read it, a lot of it is sort of personal. We ask people to give it to your rabbi, give it to your local JCC. Okay, it's a process. It's not
Well, I
going to
can
happen.
tell you my experience at my synagogue. I tried to have our book group do it, and quite honestly, I didn't get a reason, but they said it's not for us. My guess is because it's too controversial. How
Yeah, of
has it
course.
been received? How has it been received by synagogues?
It's a struggle. I mean, we only operate through local people. So we had one woman help us put it in the synagogue library or the JCC, whatever Jewish library there is. It's a process. We do not have the resources to sort of force anybody to do anything. So it's done through our local chapters, step by step. You got to take a long-term view.
Okay.
I think that a lot of it has to do with relationship. You go to your rabbi and you can urge it. Here's a book, Rabbi, please read it. I'd love to discuss with you. I'll be at the JCC in Tampa, Florida in a month. I was invited. It's not easy to be invited and talk about this topic. It takes somebody locally who can influence that institution. And that's the only way it's going to happen.
Well, I hope to meet you when you're in Tampa because I live in Clearwater. The other question is, what about in Israel? Has the Israeli government got somebody who's read the book who wants to help you? I would think this kind of book would be good for Israel as well as good for the Jews
It
and good
could.
for America for that matter.
Yeah, no, we had the launching of the book was in the Begin Center in Jerusalem. So we work with certain intellectuals in Israel. But look, we're a small organization. We cannot do everything. We have to focus. And our focus is on the American Jewish community. It's the American Jewish leadership that we're talking about. And it takes time to disseminate information.
But you said the Begin Center. That's a political party. What about the Israeli embassy in Washington or in New York?
No. The Begin Center is a venue for events. Yeah, we know what Begin was. And the point is, we had an event and we had people and we spread the word. But that's not our focus. Our focus is right in America and in local communities. So we have people in about a dozen American communities, and their job is to get this book into local leadership, their neighbors, and so forth. And that's a process.
Okay. Let me ask you one other question. I actually was talking to somebody at a Talmud study class in my synagogue, and he said, this whole war, it's been very upsetting. I can't sleep. But to me, it's like a second chance for American Jewry. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I know you made this film about Peter Bergson, and during the Second World War, American Jews failed to rescue European Jewry. But now, American Jews have a second chance to save Israel from Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood. Do you think it's going to come out any differently this time?
Look, one thing I don't do is predict the future. Nobody can predict the future. Everything is possible. So the only question is, what are we doing? And I think that this is an opportunity for clarity in many ways. And I think what we're trying to do is point out that a lot of sort of utopian thinking has clearly failed if you look at what's going on. And therefore, people need to rethink their belief, their value system, the way they look at the world. Okay? This kumbaya nonsense has got to stop. This two-state solution doesn't solve anything. If they want to kill us, what are you doing? All right. So I think there's an opportunity here to educate the Jewish public. And by the way, the leaders, they're not stupid. Whatever it is that may be delusional, and they too will adjust. I'm optimistic in that sense. And we need to accelerate the learning process. That's what our role is.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I think that wraps up the talk of the book. Where can people get the book? I got it from Amazon on Kindle, but how else can people get your book?
Okay, the book is available hard copy, soft copy, paperback, Audible, Kindle, both on the Barnes and Nobles and Amazon.
And who are some of the authors? I mentioned Dershowitz, yourself, and Charles Jacob. There was a whole bunch of different authors who are quite famous.
I have to get the book. I don't remember. There are 20 authors. Some of them are more well known. Saying, oh, my wife moved my book. Some of them are well known. Others are activists who describe specific experiences that they encountered. But I think the combination of analysis and what I saw proof points of actual stories, incidences, is powerful. And clearly, there's an issue that needs to be addressed. Now, okay, here we go. I got it. I have my Kindle version right here.
Okay. So I was looking it up. You tell me.
Yeah. Anyway, so we've got Jonathan Tobin of JNS, Professor Richard Landis, formerly of BU, Josh Block, the former CEO of the American Israel Project. We've got Carolyn Glick. We've got Thane Rosenbaum, professor, writer, Mort Klein, Rabbi Kerry Kosberg from Columbus, moderate Muslim leader Zudi Jasser, who can tell you how Jews don't understand Islam, William Jacobson from the Legal Insurrection, and Laurie Regan, anyway, and the rest are really local activists who will tell you their experience in dealing with failed leadership in their community.
Okay, and you also, I saw on the front, have endorsements from Dennis Prager, who I think is actually also a rabbi, and I think from Daniel Pipes, who's an expert on Islam. And so I think the book is well worth reading. I read it like in 2 days. You can also read an essay a day if you like. It'll take you 10 days or something like that. And I just think you did a wonderful thing putting it out, and I congratulate you. Let me, as long as I have you here, and you're an Israeli, and you're familiar with the Muslim Brotherhood and so forth, can you explain a little bit what's going on? Because you have a background in IT and high tech yourself. You have an engineering degree. What happened in this whole high tech warfare thing in Israel? Did they just put too much faith in cyber, and they forgot about the human factor and having an industrial base and giving people guns on the borders and walls and landmines and anti-tank barriers and concrete and so forth? Or is something else going on?
Well, the answer is we don't know yet. There are certain rumors, there are certain data points, but we'll find out. But clearly, it's a massive failure. And the failure, from my experience, working in high tech for 30, 40 years, is the human factor. Okay, and the lack of contingency planning. I don't know what people were thinking. There's always a bit of hubris. There's always a little bit of laziness. There's always bad assumptions that aren't tested. But it's basically a failure of management. And we'll find out. And it's tragic, and it's really was unnecessary. But things happen. So it's not a technology problem. It's a human problem.
All right. Well, we'll wait for the Commissioner of Inquiry for more details. Just before you go, what do you think might happen with this invasion of Gaza? Do you think it will succeed? Do you see any problems? Do you see a Lebanon-like scenario unfolding where it just goes poof, and in the end you have thousands of missiles again? I mean, given your experience as an Israeli, high tech, working in politics, and especially vis-a-vis I mean, I met some people who didn't even know Hamas was founded by the Muslim Brotherhood, working with the Muslim Brotherhood. I don't even know, for instance, is Hamas listed as a terrorist organization in the United States? I don't know even these basics myself. What do you see unfolding?
Well, look, I don't predict the future. Everything is possible. I really hope and have faith that the Israeli leadership is smart enough to do the right thing, and I wish them all the best. I don't think I'm smarter than they are. There are a lot of risks in whatever you do, and you have no choice but to take risks. There are no solutions, there are only trade-offs. You don't invade, you leave Hamas in place, you have to deal with, I'll repeat, but I think that it takes a lot of smart people to figure it out. And but I have no idea. I have no idea what Iran is going to do. I have no idea what's going to happen. I'm very worried. As I said, I've got family there. My daughter, 3 grandkids, and a lot of young people in the army, and it's a dangerous situation. I worry a lot about it, but I cannot tell you what's going to happen. I just
All
hope
right.
leaders will be smart.
All right. Well, I guess only God knows what's going to happen. But the other thing is on the American side, looking at the American Jewish community, you said you thought things had improved. They'd shifted their paradigm. What do you see happening domestically in America, in the Jewish community specifically, in terms of support for Israel in the coming days, weeks, months, even years? We don't know how long this is going to go on.
Well, I think that there clearly has been increased support for Israel by the Jewish community. I know synagogues are all mobilizing to raise money to support Israelis. So I think it's a time for unity, and I think it's important to push for that. There are always the fringe Jews, the Jewish Voice for Peace, and the other, what I call, I don't know if they were idiots, but they are people who've learned nothing from history, people who are what I call moral narcissists. They want to be morally pure, morally superior. So they're idiots in any sense of the word. I'm a child of Holocaust survivors, and I was born in Poland after the war. I was just in Auschwitz when this thing happened. And you see so many young Americans who are so ignorant and so silly because they are so well prosperous, so privileged. They don't understand the real life, and they're a danger to the community. But I think that there's increased awareness. This is an opportunity to recalibrate Jewish education and Jewish leadership to focus on the fact that we're always under threat. We always need to be vigilant. And if you had any doubt, look what happened. Look at all the people you thought were your friends. Look at all the people who claim to be decent, when in fact, they're not so decent. They didn't speak up. It's not about Israel. They don't speak about rape. All the feminists, I don't get it. All right? It tells you a lot about hypocrites. All right? And so I'm optimistic that this could be an expensive but important lessons for the American Jewish community.
Well, thank you very much. On that note, I think we should wrap up the recording. If you'll stay tuned for a minute or two, I want to talk to you afterwards. But again, we've had Avi Goldwasser, who's co-editor of the book Betrayal, which you can get on your Amazon Kindle or at a bookstore or at, I guess, Barnes & Noble or anywhere. It's also on Audible if you like audiobooks. And I think you'll find it well worth reading. And thank you for publishing it. And now we'll stop the recording.
Thank you for hosting me.